First number for this morning? 8, correct? Just one verse because it's a long purport. Okay. Jaya Kale tu Satvasya Devarshin Rajaso Suran Tamaso Yaksha Rakshamsi Tadkala Nugano Bhajet Jaya Kale tu Satvasya Devarshin Rajaso Suran Tamaso Yaksha Rakshamsi Tatkala Nugano Bhajet Jaya Kale tu Satvasya Devarshin Rajaso Suran See Tatkala Nugano Bhajet Ladies, please. Jaya Kale, in the time of prominence. 2, indeed. Satvasya, of goodness. Deva, the demigods. Rishin, and the sages. Rajasaha, of passion. Asuran, the demons. Tamasaha, of ignorance. Yaksha Rakshansi, the yakshas and rakshasas. Tatkala Anugranaha, according to the particular time. Abhajat, fostered. Translation: when the quality of goodness is prominent, the sages and demigods flourish with the help of that quality with which they are infused and surcharged by the Supreme Lord. Similarly, when the mode of passion is prominent, the demons flourish. And when ignorance is prominent, the yakshas and rakshasas flourish. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is present in everyone's heart, fostering the reactions of Sattva Guna, Rajo Guna, and Tamo Guna. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Supreme Personality of Godhead is not partial to anyone. The conditioned soul is under the influence of the various modes of material nature, and behind material nature is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But one's victory and loss under the influence of Sattva Guna, Rajo Guna, and Tamo Guna are reactions of these modes, not of the Supreme Lord's partiality. Srila Jiva Goswami in the Bhakti Bhagavat Sandarbha has clearly said Satvadayo na santishe yatra cha prakrita guna sa shuddha sarva shuddhebhya puman adya prasidatu. Ladani sadhani samvit twayake twa yeka sarva sangstatau. Lada tapa kari mishra twayino guna varjate, according to this statement of the Bhagavata Sandarbha. The Supreme Lord, being always transcendental to the material qualities, is never affected by the influence of these qualities. This same characteristic is also present in the living being. But because he is conditioned by material nature, even the pleasure potency of the Lord is manifested in the conditioned soul as troublesome. In the material world, the pleasure enjoyed by the conditioned soul is followed by many painful conditions. For instance, we have seen that in the two great wars which were conducted by the Rajo Guna and Tamo Guna, both parties were actually ruined. The German people declared war against the English to ruin them, but the result was that both parties were ruined. Although the Allies were apparently victorious, at least on paper, actually neither of them were victorious. Therefore, it should be concluded that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not partial to anyone. Everyone works under the influence of various modes of material nature. And when the various modes are prominent, the demigods or demons appear victorious under the influence of these modes. Paragraph. Everyone enjoys the fruits of his qualitative activities. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14:11 through 13. Sarva dvareshu dehesmin prakasha upajayate jnanam yada tada vidyad vivridham sattvam ityuta. Lobha pravatir arambha karmanam ashama spriha rajasyetani jayante vivridhe bharatarshava. Aprakasho pravishtascha pramado moha evacha tamasyetani jayante vivridhe kuru nandana. Translation. The manifestations of the modes of goodness can be experienced when all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. O chief of the Bharatas, when there is an increase in the mode of passion, the symptoms of great attachment, uncontrolled desire, hankering, and intense endeavor develop. O son of Kuru, when there is an increase in the mode of ignorance, madness, illusion, inertia, and darkness are manifested. Unquote. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present in everyone's heart, simply gives the results of the increase in the various qualities, but he is impartial. He supervises victory and loss, but he does not take part in them. The various modes of material nature do not work all at once. The interactions of these modes are exactly like seasonal changes. Sometimes there is an increment of Rajoguna, sometimes of Tamoguna, and sometimes Sattva Guna. Generally, the demigods are surcharged with Sattva Guna, and therefore when the demons and the demigods fight, the demons The demigods are victorious because of the prominence of their sattva guna qualities. However, this is not the partiality of the Supreme Lord. So obviously, the opening question is going to be thoroughly answered in this chapter and then in the canto, and its importance for us is to get proper sambandha gyan. Proper sambandha gyan meaning the relationship of things, all things, with their source of all things. So Krishna is the source of all things, and one of his characteristics is that he is impartial, and while he is impartial, we see diversity within his creation. And within his creation, that diversity looks like some are getting some favor and some are getting some disfavor. At least that's what it looks like. So then how to understand he's impartial and some are flourishing and some are not. So in various ways, this beginning section of the chapter is going to go over the topic thoroughly. And some of the points being made here includes this principled understanding that behind the modes, there's the Supreme Person. And he's not partial towards this mode, that mode, or the other mode, because he's impartial. He's not partial. He's not showing favoritism. However, this mode yields this quality and characteristic and commonly results from activities according to the modes and so forth and so on. So there's victory, and the topic is victory and loss. That goes back to the first particular point that's being raised. That particular point that was being raised in the first verse had to do with Indra being protected, and those who were the enemies of Indra becoming, the object of the personality of God has admonishment. So they look like partial. It certainly looked like partial. How did Vishnu become partial like a common man for the sake of Indra and thus kill Indra's enemies? How can a person equal to everyone be partial to some and inimical towards others? So he wasn't inimical towards the others. As they had enmity towards Indra, behind the enmity towards Indra is behind the enmity towards Vishnu. Enmity towards a devotee means enmity towards the Supreme. It's implied. So the Supreme isn't Krishna or Vishnu. It's not inimical towards those who are inimical to him or towards Indra. But they want to see him as enemy, and so he agrees, okay. You wish me to be your enemy? Okay. You wish me to be your friend? Okay. And he reciprocates. It's the nature of love, because the Supreme is all loving, and it's not partiality like the classic. A father may have many children, and of the many children, the father has affection for all the children. And amongst all the children, one of them may be particularly dependent upon and affectionate to, etc., the father. And the father's reciprocating. It's natural. And those that want to be more independent and more aloof and more something, he's, he reciprocates with them according to their disposition. So that's what's going on here with Indra and the enemies of Indra. Now he takes the position, as we know from first canto, the demons are those who are the enemies of Indra. And Krishna appears to check the enemies of Indra. But so let's look again. The enemies of Indra means the enemies of Vishnu. Because Indra is acting as an agent of Vishnu. Enmity towards Indra means enmity towards Vishnu. And he doesn't mind enmity towards him, but he does mind enmity towards Indra or his devotees. And he takes action because of this natural condition, not a partiality condition. Those who seek his shelter, he gives it. He gives his shelter. Those that don't want his shelter, he doesn't give it. He doesn't force it. So his position is neutral. He's just reciprocating with how others regard. And so now this is taking away from the person, it's going to the modes of nature. And those influenced by this mode, that mode, the other mode, they have different positions. So just to reiterate, in the mode of goodness, of course, demigods, unlike rishis, demigods have some passion, but a strong amount of goodness. So rishis and demigods in the category of strongly influenced by goodness. And interesting, demons aren't in the ignorance category, demons are in the passion category. And lower than the passion category are the rakshasas and yakshas. Just like the followers of Kuvera, they're yakshas. It's the followers of Kuvera that killed Dhruva's stepbrother. Yakshas do a number of things. So they're further down in the modes of nature, even than demons. Interesting. So that then, according to their modes of nature, Krishna reciprocates. Because according to their modes of nature, they'll have a particular regard due to the nature of the modes towards the Supreme, and he reciprocates with their regard for him according to their mode. It's quite natural. It's loving. So his loving nature doesn't change because someone is inimical to him. Okay, you'd like to be my enemy? Very well. I'll say heavy things and I'll finish you and you'll get liberation. So the behavior, it's something like, it's nice that the whole Vritrasura story, because he was an elevated personality before he became Vritrasura, he was cursed by Parvati to become a demon. And so he became a demon. And in his demon position, he was the enemy of Indra. But so he behaved that way because that was the curse. But he Vritrasura, was fully transcendental. He simply wanted, and in his transcendental mood, he simply wanted to be with Lord Vishnu. And it would be hastened if Indra killed him. So when Indra got bewildered, he told him, don't drop your weapon, finish me. Here's how you can finish me. And please do it quickly because I want to go back to Godhead. And his conscious, so he was acting as if an enemy of Indra, but he wasn't. Indra got bewildered, so he bonked him with his club. Airavata, and Airavata went flying, and so Indra had to fight because that's what is required when there's a charging enemy. Anyway, as Vritrasura was behaving as if an enemy of Indra, but his consciousness was fully transcendental, what to speak of Vishnu. He protects Indra, but he's not inimical towards those who he's giving protection from. It's the value of all of this is Sambandha Gyan. To have a proper understanding of Sambandha Gyan, like all things in relation to the source. And the source is neutral, and then there's diversity out there in that which the source manifests. And according to the modes, there's differences and differences and differences of features and aspects of life, including regard for the personality of Godhead and those connected to the personality of Godhead. So there's some people that are inimical. It's part of the message that Prabhupada would repeat often and so often. You become a devotee and people will become your enemy. Why do people become your enemy? Because Vishnu or Krishna is the enemy. That's why they're in the material world. They're in the material world because they have inimical regard for the source of everything. Not only just say atheistic, but they're inimical. And because they're inimical, when you become a devotee, they're going to be people that are inimical. Simply because there are people that don't like the personality of God, because of the nature of the place. Supposing, there's conversation in a prison about the police. They don't like the police because the police enforce the law, and they don't like having the law enforced. They don't like being in prison, so they don't like the police. So similarly, or law enforcement agents, similarly, those in the material world, they don't like Vishnu. It's a place for people who don't want Vishnu as their authority. And then there's some devotees come into their life and they don't like. Become a devotee and you'll have sufficient number of people that don't like you, simply because you're a devotee. Like, the classic is Prahlad, simply because he was a devotee. And he didn't comply with the values that his father wanted. Up to the point where his father was prepared to kill him. Simply because of one thing. He was devoted to Vishnu. And very clear for Hiranyakashipu, Vishnu is an enemy. Vishnu is an enemy because he killed my brother. But why did he kill his brother? Because his brother was disrupting the universe. And his brother got liberation. But so inimical towards Vishnu. And here's his son devoted to Vishnu. Kill him. So carrying on, this is some weaving of Jiva Goswami's writings in Bhagavad Sandarbha and some verses in Bhagavad Gita to just bring out further. The Lord is not partial. So the reference to Bhagavad Sandarbha, the Lord is apapa vidham, he's pure. He's not influenced by the modes of nature, although he's the source of them. He's never affected by the modes of nature. Then he concludes, the living being is also by nature transcendental. However, the living entity being very tiny can be influenced by the modes of nature. And when the living entity is influenced by the modes of nature, conditioned by the modes of nature, I'll read. The same characteristic is also present in the living being, but because he is conditioned by nature, conditioned by material nature, even the pleasure potency of the Lord is manifested in the conditioned soul as troublesome. Now, what's that pleasure potency? The Hladini potency of the Supreme Lord. Because of an inimical attitude towards the Supreme Lord, it acts differently. The pleasure potency acts differently. The pleasure potency looks like material happiness, and this pursuit of material happiness gives misery. The foundation, the resting point is one's regard for the Supreme. And one's regard for the Supreme has then some impact on regard for the pleasure potency. And the regard for the pleasure potency wrongly gives misery, although it looks like pleasure. It's like Ravana kidnapping Sita. Or anyone in the material world wanting, like we've been discussing in the evening classes, this the pleasure potency or the internal potency of the Lord to the materialist looks like Durga. And Durga means for materialist facility for material enjoyment. But supposing one doesn't see material enjoyment and one sees enjoyment in relation to Krishna, then like we discussed yesterday, the gopis that were worshiping Katyayani, who's one of the forms or names of Durga, they were worshiping the internal potency. And it's because it's the internal potency that can deliver Krishna directly. It's an interesting science. It boils down to how you regard Krishna, and how you regard Krishna then is going to determine how you regard everything. The resting point is Krishna is the source of everything. Aham sarvasya prabhavo, etc. So because he's the source of everything, how one has regard for him, you'll see everything, or anything. And the inimical toward Krishna position is to see as an object meant for my enjoyment. And that if someone else is a competitor for that object of enjoyment, then I have an attitude towards that competitor. And I can't see things properly. So when people can't see things properly, and that which is in relation to Krishna is seen otherwise, then Krishna reciprocates. He acts as if he's inimical, but he's not. Because separate from Krishna's interacting with conditioned souls according to their modes, he's simultaneously broadcasting his message, which is, don't see these things as objects of enjoyment, see them in relation to me because they are. And you can see them in relation to me if you have proper regard for me. So the advocacy is have proper regard for Krishna. So you need to spell out all this Sambandha Gyan topic. And that's what's going on. It's to nourish the natural devotion by seeing, rather than separately, seeing in relation to the source. Once again, those that don't see in relation to the source, they're influenced by the modes. And so they have a certain behavior, a certain lifestyle, a certain everything, and there's their bondage due to their activities in those modes of nature and forgetfulness of Krishna. Prabhupada spends a fair amount of time pointing to the two world wars. This party, that party. One party wanted to annihilate the other party, but then there are persons that sided with the party that wanted to annihilate the England, because Germany and England were competitors historically for a long time. So when one became strong, they wanted to dominate the other. So, but in paper, the Allies won. England's group won, and Germany lost, but they both lost. So competition in these lower modes, ignorance and passion, lead to when is defeated. And conversely, the moving towards the side of the mode of goodness, then there is victory. But even with victory, there's loss. Because one is still implicated with the modes of nature. That is to say, one's real identity is not fully manifest. So the real kindness of Krishna and impartiality of Krishna and Krishna's devotees, likewise, is to encourage people to come to the stage of unobstructed surrender to Krishna. That's where Sambandha Gyan leads to, having a proper conception of the source of everything, and then acting accordingly, abhideya, and then reaching the fruit of that abhideya. The connection is secure. So there's the philosophy of Sambandha Gyan, and then there's the illumination of that Sambandha Gyan through historical narrations, which is what is going on in the Bhagavatam. Revealing truths about Bhagavan and our relationship with him, and how to properly understand things that are otherwise bewildering, like the apparent partiality or impartiality. Let's see if there's some discussion. Yeah.
Just thinking about this point you just mentioned about how we should say everything in relation to Krishna, and that way we won't be implicated by the material words. But I'm thinking my situation where when I'm chanting, in Krishna's name, I'm not thinking about Krishna, I'm not finding that relationship. So how do I, even like doing material things, how do I make sure I think about Krishna or find myself that I have some relationship with Krishna?
Sadhu Sangha. The answer to how-to questions has that simple answer, 2 words. Then you can unpack Sadhu Sangha. And when you have Sadhu Sangha, what does it look like? You do with sadhus what sadhus do. What do sadhus do? Bhajana Kriya. That's what sadhus do. So you do Bhajana Kriya. So Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata. Bhagavata is a sadhu. Bhagavata is that which is in relation to Bhagavan. So the book and the person, Bhagavata, when you have the person Bhagavata's association or sadhu, you hear topics of Krishna. Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu. So the using Prabhupada's words, the dirty things, the abhadras, inauspicious things within the heart become cleansed. That's our process. Supposing we're not there yet. We're not there yet. So what do you do when you're not there yet? You continue sadhu sangha because it has the effect. And if you want to accelerate the effect, then you make your best effort to align yourself to both the sound vibration, the Hare Krishna mantra, or the topics in relation to Krishna, the Bhagavata topics in relation to Krishna, and align yourself as best you can, make a sincere effort to hear with attention, and as Prabhupada would say, try to understand. And if you don't understand, that's okay. Continue to try to understand. And that to try to understand means you listen more attentively, you listen more analytically, you listen more carefully. And it's not exactly, the analytical nature that brings one beyond the modes. It's the sound vibration itself from the right source. So that's what we do, or strive to do. And how attentive we are to that striving in that way is going to determine how quickly or slowly the influence of the modes of nature subside. And the clouds clear and one can see properly. Yes.
Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. This living nature, right?
Living entities are?
Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. Jiva living
Yes.
nature.
Well, the living entities, Bhuta can mean different things. That's one of its meanings.
I mean, those things is Sanatana.
Yeah. So, but you're pointing to a phrase and expanding on the phrase, and I'm commenting on Sanskrit words are to be understood within boundaries, but according to context. So one possible meaning, if there's living entities and there's material nature, and there's Sanatana, and that's also correct. But my understanding, at least, of that phrase is the nature of living entities is that they're eternally connected to Krishna, not referring to material nature.
This is also Sanatana.
Yes.
That mode of nature and all designed by the Lord himself.
Well, ultimately, yes.
That means
Everything.
everything, because he expands himself like
Yes. Yes.
finally, it's all the one for him is enjoying.
Well, he reciprocates with living entities because of it's his nature. So I'm responding to for his enjoyment message. It's not that he enjoys creating and seeing people suffering within the creation. He doesn't enjoy that. But he, when living entities are stubborn and they insist, then he creates a situation where their intention looks like it's being fulfilled, but instead it's suffering. That it instead is suffering has a purpose. The purpose is having living entities recognize eventually that was a bad idea. Separate enjoyment was really dumb. But he doesn't interfere because of his loving nature. Okay. I mean, I don't advise it. There's consequences. But okay.
I mean, it's not going to never stop.
He's not going to do what?
Never stop.
Stop what?
Nature or
That's okay. Okay. But that action now, just because you're focusing on a particular, again, you're focusing on a particular meaning of the word Bhuta, and the meaning you're wanting to focus on is Prakriti or material nature, and that's one sense of what Bhuta means. There's other senses. Yes, it's eternal, but how it acts is going to be variegated depending upon our regard for Krishna. That same Prakriti acts as a feature of liberation as opposed to a feature of bondage, depending upon one's regard for Krishna.
If I understand, I have to do my duty.
Yeah,
how this condition.
Good. good. I'm sure you do. I'm sure you understand that.
Everything is there. At
What-
the same time, I have to understand those things also come out how.
At the same time, you're supposed to understand what?
Yeah, those things how work.
Those things, how they do what?
How work.
Work, how they work? Oh, yeah. I think we're saying the same thing, it's just our language is different. Yes, it's important for us to understand how these things work. My point is very simple. One's regard for Krishna will enable us to understand properly or not. Supposing we don't have a proper regard for Krishna, then we're not going to understand how these things are working. It's exactly this topic. Is Krishna partial or not? Some people seem to get a good deal. Some people seem to get a bad deal. Look like he's partial. Those that are friends of Indra, they get a good deal. Those that are enemies of Indra, they get a bad deal. So he's partial. So that's the topic. So therefore, I'm trying to stick on the theme of this beginning part of the canto. The theme is, according to one's regard for Krishna, the modes of nature act. It's not Krishna's partiality. So the diversity amongst material nature or prakriti, why is there diversity? It has everything to do with one's regard for Krishna. And he gives options. And the Vayantadis select from the menu. This option, that option. And once they're on a track of a particular selection, it's hard to change it because they become conditioned by that mode of nature. It's not easy for someone who's influenced by tamagun to rise quickly to sattvagun. It's possible. The bhakti process is meant to elevate one so that it becomes not just possible, but in fact. So I'm saying things that I'm sure you don't disagree with. Is your original question now satisfied, or not really?
I'm just wondering Siddhanta Sumiti Nakala Chaitanya Chaitanya.
Yeah.
Which is the Siddhanta.
Some devotees want to go where?
No, I mean Chaitanya Chaitanya that sloka is there, right? Siddhanta Sumiti Nakala something like Siddhanta means philosophy come like this.
Yes.
And all these things.
Yes.
And at that time, devotees should not be halasa. Not asking question, not understanding. Chanting and then said I have to be speaking about those things of how. That's the reason I was.
Okay.
Person. Firstly, I try to get the answer from myself. How much knowledge I have, I just think this supposed to be this answer, this supposed to be the answer, and then when not comes to the answer, and then I maybe possibly this is the answer, possibly the answer. So I try to get the answer, and if not, and then I ask.
Well, you continue to be patient and with purification and hearing. The sadhu sangha answer again.
There's the question coming up. Oh, Jiva and Buddha is Sanatana, nature and this all Sanatana. It's kind of going on, never making sound. That means it's all living entity. One day in the spiritual world and the next day in the material world. It's not happening.
No, it's not going to happen.
That's just my question.
Okay. Okay. Well, you know the passage from Chaitanya Charitamrita where Haridas Thakur says to Lord Chaitanya, if you emptied out the whole universe, no problem, it'd be filled up again. Because if it gets filled up again, where'd they come from? There's innumerable living entities. Some are manifesting forms, and there's many that are not manifesting forms. The ones that with forms become delivered. There's unlimited numbers of living entities to replace them. Okay. Anything else? Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.